Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Curva Coaching Podcast. We're joined by a very special guest, my dad and Curva Coaching co-founder, Alf Galusian. Alf, Dad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim.
You've had a long and storied career working at many professional clubs and federations over 40 years. And today's topic, and really the theme for all our podcasts, is transferring the knowledge and experience of pros to the grassroots game, particularly grassroots coaches, parents and players. So we're going to take some of the lessons that you've observed and some of your experiences and apply it to the grassroots. So today we're going to look at the 7 tips or 7 most common issues you've seen in grassroots football after you've watched a lot of grassroots football, particularly with our kids, your grandkids, over the last sort of 5 or 10 years. And again, it's most relevant between the age groups of about 7 to 14. So that's sort of what the age group we'll talk about, and it'll be mixed ability players. So you talked about sort of 7 main issues in grassroots football. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of came to be aware of those and how you began to analyse those?
I will, Jim. Obviously, you know, I love to watch my 3 grandkids play regularly. Aaron plays seldom. So it was from really the COVID years when I wasn't traveling to pro clubs and federations, and I had more time. So I came to watch the games. As you say, 7 to 14 was the age group, boys and girls. And, you know, often when I give talks in coaches' education, I give talks to parents as well as the pro clubs and to coaches. And I'm saying, look, always be positive. There's no point being critical, apart from behaviour, because the kids have got to love to play, and if they love to play, they possibly could get better. Any criticism, negativity is no good. But I found myself very frustrated, Jim, because I've been in this game since I was 16, almost 16 years old. Maybe I'm seeing things too much in detail. Anyway, I went back and saying to my wife, look, I don't know, you know, this is too frustrating for me to watch sometimes. I'm seeing these problems, and I think I can provide solutions. Because to me, for all coaches, whatever level, there's a problem, but then you've got to provide a solution. As you know, I keep a notebook next to my bed, and one morning, 2:00, got up and I wrote down 7 things that I was seeing constantly. Every single week I was seeing, which to me were problems, but can I say difficulties? I don't really, it's a negative word, problem. There were difficulties.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the first one was about first touch. This was the most apparent one that you thought was obvious. You were seeing it consistently at all those levels of the game.
Yes, and it's important, of course, at all levels. And the relative first touch is that it gives you more time and space. When you have more time and space, you probably make less mistakes. Going back to the enjoyment at this level. Of course, as the players get to play at a high level and get older, that space and time is also restricted even more. So your first touch, then your second touch or your final touch depends on your first touch. So it's a huge topic in football, and again, a difficulty in football, even at the pro level. Let me define the problems and then the solutions on the practice field and on game day. But the first one that I was seeing nearly always was most of the kids were struggling with their first touch.
Right.
The second thing that I'm seeing nearly every week was, let me call it panic passing. What's it mean? Because you've got to really define, you know, when you throw out words, you've got to define what they mean to be explained. So panic passing, they were passing when they they didn't have to pass. And panic was that the actual trigger for that was somebody running at them. Even if they were 15 meters away, that just looking at somebody running at them made them pass the ball.
Do you think some communication from the sidelines also does that as well, whether it's the parents, the coaches, etc.? Do you think that also helps influence that decision?
It certainly doesn't help, Jim.
Yeah.
And again, I hate, you know, parents and grassroots coaches do such a great job that I'm very loath to be critical. I will say that it doesn't help, you know, because the word panic in front of passing, if the kid suddenly hears, you know, get rid of it, for example, you know, you hear these common, in whatever language, it causes panic.
Yes. And the kid, especially if your instruction as a coach is we want to, for example, play out from the back through the thirds, and the instruction or the communication they're hearing on the sideline, maybe from their parents, is contrary to that, it causes confusion as well, doesn't it?
And that's a really good point, because I know at pro clubs, and especially when I had the years in Japan, every 6 weeks we used to have a parents' evening, and to actually explain to the parent, for example, why play possession? Well, because you get more touches, and actually explain to the parents, well, we're doing this because we want your player to improve. So I do think that you brought up a good point there, to try to get buy-in, because you can't force anybody to do something. Everything is a matter of opinion. But to try to sort of say, look, we're playing this way because your kid is going to be get more touches, and when they get more touches, their first touch will be better and their passing will be better. And so once they understand that, maybe they won't commentate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. Number 3, it was overcrowding.
Yeah, especially with the young ones under 10. And I know all the coaches listening will have that experience. So I know they start at 5v5, 7v7, 9v9. The younger ones, especially under 10, tend to follow the ball. Which look, well, I'm sure when I was 10 years old that happened. But it can be a problem, and again, we'll talk about the solution.
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned the different formats. Obviously, in England next year, they're introducing 3v3 as well, and maybe that's part of the solutions you'll discuss.
Yes.
In my experience, that particularly at that U10 age group, it is probably ever present. I don't think there's probably any coach out there that hasn't witnessed all the players following the ball as it moves around the pitch.
Yes.
So that's a great sort of solution that I know will be popular with everyone. Number 4, place and time of call. I assume that this is when you don't have the ball, you're about to receive the ball, calling for the ball at the wrong time and wrong place.
So the player with the ball at all levels of football is dependent on the player without the ball. And where they're dependent is where they are. So, okay, if I've got the ball, where are you? But this, and again, to explain to the parents and the coaches, you always hear this word, communicate. It's just half the message. It's where and when you speak, right? So when we get to the suggested solutions, there's no point me calling if I'm standing next to my teammate or my opponent. So it just doesn't make sense, right? So this idea of communication has to be explained. It's not the communication, it's where and when you speak.
Yeah.
And it's nearly always just what I've seen. And at pro clubs, of course, these are the best players that are selected. Again, we've got some solutions, because even the young players at the pro clubs have this problem. You get excited, you call for the ball.
Yeah.
But first of all, you've got to get in space, and then you call for the ball. So we'll talk about solutions.
Yeah, and that's absolutely apparent to the U12 boys and girls that I coach. The amount of times they ask for the ball and they're standing next to their opponent. And they're obviously not yet anyway Luka Modric or someone like that, Iniesta or Xavi, who you'd give the ball in those situations, right? I mean, that's obviously a different level.
Well, it's not really, because this is simple. This is I can't remember, some years ago we did with Adidas interview with Xavi. He said it exactly like you'd say to a Grassroots kid. He said, if I'm standing near my teammate or near the opponent, I don't want the ball. So I go to space and I want the ball. That's the clue. So you look up, I'm too near my teammate, I'm too near the opponent, I'm in the wrong place. I can't speak.
That's a great tip from Xavi, but think about someone like Busquets, who always seems to be open in the most congested part of the field. How did he do that all his career?
Okay, so we're getting into a slightly different area here. So Busquets was the tip of the diamond, right? To me, whenever I watch a game, I see triangles. I'm been obsessed with triangles for like 30 years. So 2 triangles is a diamond, right? He's at the tip of that. When in Busquets, whether it was the Spanish national team or Barcelona, he had Iniesta and Xavi and Messi. And so he tended, as soon as they were in trouble, he just dropped back into space and received the ball. And he was a two-touch player, mostly a two-touch player. So that sort of player, it's very difficult when players, it goes back to the first touch. When your first touch is into space, very difficult to press you. But there was always a system. Xavi, Iniesta, problem, back to him. Problem for him, back to them.
Yes. And do you think, I know throughout Curver's history, you've always used star models to inspire players to learn and be enthused about the game. When you think about all these topics that we're discussing now, is that also a good tool for coaches to employ to sort of get over the point? Okay, so we're talking about first touch. The best first touch player is X. Is that going to be part of what you're going to suggest? Or
so when we started, Jim, Charlie and I actually made the curriculum based on, say, 12 players. This is 40 years ago, like Cruyff and Stanley Matthews and people like that. Now kids are watching so much football. They've got so many different sort of stars and they follow so many different stars. I'm not sure if this topic, especially of communication, is something you say, well, Grealish communicates. Yeah. I'm not sure if it means anything.
Okay.
I think it's better done on the practice field when we talk later about solutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 5, 1v1 purpose, when and where?
Okay. So as you know, probably Curver has the biggest library built over 40 years of 1v1. Really, every Premier League club uses Curver 1v1 in their academy, every single one of them. So it's a topic that we worked on a long time, and it's a really important topic. It's a game changer. But the grassroots games that I saw, and even in some pro games, is that the player often doesn't know why they're doing it. And when you don't know why you're doing something, you do it probably in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it was a where and when that was going wrong. Not so much the technique, because by repetition you can learn a technique, right? But the frustrating thing was that they didn't understand the where and when.
Yes.
And the purpose of 1v1 is to create space to pass, shoot, or run. It's not necessarily to go past someone. It's to create space. Now, I'm giving you the first clue of what all the problems about, every 7 of these problems that I saw. And it's the first clue I'm giving you, space, to create space to pass, shoot, or run. And they nearly always got it wrong. And I'm not being, I don't mean to be critical. I'm just saying, look, you see a problem, you want to make a solution.
And I think sometimes people think the 1v1 topic is reserved for forward players only. Can you talk, just very quickly before we move on to the next issue,
yeah.
Can you talk about the importance of 1v1 for defenders, for example?
Okay, so in Curve 1, there's 3 categories, 3 topics. So change of direction. The purpose is to shield and protect the ball. And then there's something called stops and starts, where you actually create space by speed control. You stop, like Messi, right?
Messi, yeah.
And then you have feints where the opponent's nearly always in front of you, and you want to go past him or her on the right or left, right? Now, in your last third, I don't advise the feints, and I don't advise the stops and starts. But the change of direction category, and in Curve, there's 23, but 8 of them work very well for young players. Now, what's the purpose of 8 change of direction? These 8 in your last third is the goalkeeper plays with you. If you believe in playing with the goalkeeper, you're pressed, so you have to use one of the curvy change of direction to protect the ball, because if they go in the back of you, it's a foul, right? So you use that, you give it back to the goalkeeper, you go into space, you get it back again. So they're critical. The change of directions, I never say never. I wouldn't advise against the feint section or the stop and start section. But certainly the 8 classics change of directions, really good playing with the goalkeeper.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Hi guys, Jimmy here from the podcast, and we're really proud to announce our new Curve Coaching app, available now for you to download in the iOS and Android stores. It's split into 2 different parts. Number 1, it's for you coaches. Whether you're coaching mixed ability or elite level players, there's great content and session planners on there for you, relevant for under 8s, and then there's another section for 8s to 16s as well. So coaches, download now. You can also get access to the Players Hub, which is part of the same app. That's great skills step-by-step tutorials on how to do the skills and ball masteries. The Curve 1v1 stuff is all on there. And it's fantastic for your players to practice that at home. Also on there is challenges to disguise the reps and the work really your players need to do to improve those skills. That's all in the app. Download now and back to the pod. So let's move on to number 6, running too much, running smarter.
Yeah, so my oldest grandson, who's a good athlete, he's almost 6 foot tall, he's only just 14, and midfield player, watching him going penalty area to penalty area, and I was thinking, I mean, it's great, and a lot of coaches praise hard work, which they should do, but if you want to be better, it's generalization, it's smarter work, smarter running. You choose when to run, especially if you've got to play when you're 12, 13, 14, you're playing 80 minutes, 90 minutes, right? Very difficult, that end-to-end stuff. Your body hasn't, your lung capacity isn't built up. Your physicality can't cope with it. So remember, we're talking about this age group. So it was kind of like there was too much running. And there needed to be more thought in when do I run and when do I walk and when do I jog.
Sure. And you can kind of think about, again, looking at the pro game, players that run smart. I mean, obviously they're in peak athletic shape, but I assume physically you can't sustain, particularly if you're asking young players. I'm thinking about my under 12 side going up to under 13 next year. They're going to go on an 11v11 for them next year. They don't have the physicality also to cover
exactly
and sustain it over 90 minutes or whatever the time period is.
Yes. I tell you one player to watch who's 41 years or 40 years old is Modric.
Sure.
You see? Now, they're short because he's a short ball player. So somebody gets the ball, he's 10 meters from them. But he doesn't have to run, he can jog to them. And then pass it, goes into another 10-yard space. Pass it, goes into another 10-yard space. These are 10-meter. And he's 41 or 40 years old.
Yes. Okay, last one, positional confusion.
Okay, so again, there's no doubt, I'm from the Cruyff school. He was one of the biggest influences of me when I started, that every player should have similar skill sets. I believe that. And also functionally be an attacker and defender. But what I saw in some grassroots players was and it's very fair, players play, better than me, players play equal time. But a kid would start at, say, stopper, at centre, the old centre half, but defending player, play 15 minutes, go off and come in as a left winger. There's no connection. It's very, very confusing. Now, if you're going to play a kid on the left, as an attacker, then when he comes off, put him at maybe left back or left wing back. Or if you've got a right back who's playing right back, maybe put him at midfield player, maybe on the right side, maybe not on as a left winger. At these grassroots ages, even at pro levels, remember, right-footed players outnumber left-footed players by nearly 90 to 10. I mean, some crazy ratio. But I'm not against sort of players playing in different positions to learn that they have two functions, attacking and defending.
And you can do that over the course of a season, right? What you're talking about there is game-specific. You don't want to confuse them in that game. But you might say, for example, that month you're going to do that, and then the next month we're going to give you more experience in another area, or... I don't think. Would you think that's too confusing for a younger player?
Again, a lot of what I'm telling you is just my opinion. If a player is consistently playing at centre back, right back, etc., yes, okay, you can put him up as striker for the experience. I think probably 12 to 16, I wouldn't be messing like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say probably under 10. Please play them everywhere.
Yes.
Over 10, 11, I would say, look, have relative positions like 11-3, for example, if you know what I mean by the numbers.
Yeah.
Or 4 and 8, or 2 and 7.
Sure. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah.
a link between the numbers. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we've covered the 7 issues, stroke difficulties that you've seen in grassroots football. Now you're going to talk to us about a common denominator that basically is the consistent thread that runs through all 7 of these big challenges for us all in the grassroots game.
Yeah. So I woke up and I thought every one of those problems was to do with space. So yeah, there's only so much space, 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. Of course, the space gets bigger. But the problem was every one of those was caused by the skill in the space, and let's use the sense for decision-making in the space. They didn't understand where the space was, so they didn't go in it without the ball. And with the ball, with great respect, their skills weren't good enough before they were pressed or lost it. And it was to do with that space, because if you want to experiment, you try it, just make the field bigger and put less players, they're going to make less mistakes. I guarantee you, right? And of course, conversely, if Pep was doing at Man City, he'd play 10v10 in 15x15, because space also is a fantastic tool for improving decision-making. I mean, a lot of people, when I say that, think, oh, no, it's for skill. It's not. When you restrict space, you're not the decision maker, the player is. By restricting space, you improve the speed of decision making. Mm-hmm. Now, there's speed and quality of decision making, not necessarily the quality. You will improve the speed. And so all roads that 2 a.m. that I woke up led to space. How can we improve the skill in that space and the decision making of that space? And remember, you're without the ball most of the game. 90% of the game. So it's against space. Without the ball, we close space. With the ball, we open space. And how can you then help the young players on the practice field? In the game, it's. I think you've got. My view is you've got to be less prescriptive. The game's a game, but the practice field, which I'm really interested in, is yes, there's things you can do.
Well, let's talk about that. So let's get to the sort of first bit of advice on the practice field. So firstly, sort of the 3, C's, if you like. So you've got content, construction, and communication.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about that and how grassroots coaches can think about their sessions in those terms?
Yes. So let's talk about the skill and the sense together, because football is a competitive team game. Therefore, you cannot isolate skill and decision making. I don't think you should do. Now, a lot of people misunderstood what Curver was when we started 40 years ago, because we started with the huge ball mastery library, which is isolated practice. You don't do ball mastery in a game. But there was always a purpose to that. Charlie and I and Will before us, we felt that this isolated repetition would give you a comfort and control of the ball, which was automatic, unconscious, which would then move into the content I'm suggesting, right? So whether it's against the wall or curve of ball mastery, unfortunately, grassroots coaches don't have the time to do a lot of ball mastery. So this is something to try to encourage the boys and girls to do at home. But once a player repeats constant touching of the ball, whether it's against the wall or whether it's curve of ball mastery, what happens is that they're more comfortable with the ball, which then impacts, let's call it the game core skills, the skills I need to play the team game well. It's a team game, right? So let's start with first touch. The more comfort and control I have, the better my first touch. There's 2 types of first touch. Where you put the ball, again, the word space comes in. Your first touch should go into wherever the space is, not towards your opponent or your teammate. And another thing is called touch speed, how far it falls. Because if it's right next to your body, again, the space and time is closed. They'll just press you. Mm-hmm. So we know what to teach, and we know why we're teaching it. So I look at my drill library, and I look at how can I improve first touch. I look at my drill library, how can I improve passing? I look at my drill library, how can I improve 1v1? Drill library, how can I improve running with the ball? Drill library, shooting.
The core skills.
The game core skills. I'm avoiding heading because a core skill, again, it's about definition, has to be something that's repeatable. It's not, I think heading possibly will be banned. It is banned in some countries, under 13, under 12. But I'm not mentioning it because in my 40 plus years of devising, I'm a drill designer, I can't think of a heading practice that would have enough repetition to call it a skill.
Sure.
So I've left that out. So, all these core skills, what you've got to do, you go in your drill library and you look at what drill you can use to learn the skill, and then what drill can you use to use the skill. Remember that connection between the skill and the decision making. And the curve drills, I'd like to think Charlie and I have devised them so that you don't have to move all these cones and goals, that you've got learning the skill and using the skill in the same sort of logistical
setup
area.
Yeah.
You know yourself, moving cones, and the kids get confused, or are we doing something else?
Also, you don't have the time, and you probably don't have their concentration too. You've got to move on pretty quickly.
Yes. So it's really important to actually select that. But those are the topics. When I say content, those are the topics, the game core skills.
Okay. So that's content. So that's the first one of the 3 C's. The second C, construction. So that's how you create your session, the session mix.
So that's, and that almost becomes, for pro coaches, remember they're the club all week. They have to present it to the academy manager or the whoever the academy appoints as the contact person. But grassroots coaches, better, Jim. You're working all day. You've got to pick the kids up. You've got a session. How much time can you give to it? So it does need time. So, and what we've done in Curve is try to make it a little simpler. So our classic session for 8 to 16 years old, 8 to 14, adaptable from 14 to 16. So you start with ball mastery, which is contact with the ball, but it's very short. It's maybe 5 minutes. And you make it a competition, because otherwise it's boring. Repetition is really boring. And so whatever you do in ball mastery is a competition. How many you can do, a relay race, there's loads of things you can do to make a competition. And then you go to your game core skill topic. And you divide it into learning the skill, which is something, it'll be repetitive, but again, by making it a competition, by changing the distance, by changing the space, by changing how many balls, for example, in passing, you gradually make it a little more difficult. But there's still really no defending or opposition pressure. So that half the time on your topic you spend on that, and then you go immediately into some sort of pressure, which you control. 7v3, 6v4, some sort of numbers, bigger space, smaller space, depending on the level of your players. And then you always end up with a game, which is at least 30, 40% of your time. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 2 sorts of games at this age group, in my view, at pro and grassroots. One is you say nothing. It's called a free game. And the other is what's called a conditional game. If you're doing passing that week, you can say 3 passes before you shoot. Mm-hmm. Now, under 10 years old, my view, just personally, I'd just do free games and just interfere when it's dangerous, when there's something that could hurt them. Otherwise, there's no really saying anything. Conditional games, you still don't have to say anything because the condition is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. They follow what the condition is. So, those games, if you did a survey, I would guarantee you every kid would want to, you say, which part of the session do you like best? That's what they like. Yeah. That's what I used to like, and that's what you used to like, right? That's why in Curve it's like 30, 40% of the time. And
free and conditioned can also mean multi-goals, right? It doesn't need to be, the traditional game. It can be different formats of small-sided games.
Well, back and I think it was first when I was coach educator by Munich, when I worked with Jürgen. And what was coming out then, was you remember a goal called the pug goal? It's like a little tiny goal. It was a nightmare because you had to stick it into the ground.
Yes.
It never, but the idea of these mini goals, and when we worked, what he wanted to do, because he was a striker himself, but I suggested we use all these. We never had regular goals in our under 14 practices. We used at least 4, 6, and sometimes 8 goals. And that was the start of the curve small-sided game. What's the DNA of a curve small-sided game? 4 goals, 6 goals, 8 goals. Invert the field so you don't go up and down. You change it so...
It becomes more rectangular.
No, it becomes wider. It's not the length.
Yeah.
And you put the goals on the width, right? Suddenly we saw kids actually, because the goals were spread out, looking not only one direction, they saw that goal's empty, they'd break. And so it became the DNA of a curve game, that the field was inverted from the regular, long end up to the wide air and multi-goals.
Yeah.
And that again is all over the world. When I've just come back from Argentina, they're using curve at the big clubs there, and they're using our multi-goal idea.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about session construction. You talked about the purpose, why you do it. Maybe you could talk about what you're looking for from actually the game DNA. So what's your view on grassroots coaches and the way their approach to playing the actual game?
Okay, so let me start by, and this may seem obvious to you, but I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's been in pro football years and years and years, and we were talking about what do we know about football, that's a fact, that's impossible to be interpreted, right? The rules can be interpreted. We came up with 2 things. Football is a competitive team game, and the object of a competitive team game is to win. I couldn't think of anything that you could say. Everything else was opinion. Everything was interpretation. When you're working with 8 to 16, what I think we need to do is to make match day and a pro level, but a grassroots, especially because of the time available, an extension of practice day. So practice day, you're doing, a lot of repetition work, passing, receiving, running with the ball, 1v1. You've got to play a style that gives you the possibility, I'm not saying it'll happen, of multi-touches. That can only be a possession-based game. Now, of course, you've seen it, I've seen it at grassroots and at pro games. The bigger kids, up to 12 years, got an advantage. And so the coach, you get the goalkeeper kicking long and the bigger kid goes through and they win games and they're all happy, right? But there's a difference between coaching winning and coaching development. The short term is coaching winning. Now you've got to then convince the parents and the coaches that there's a difference, and what's the difference? So the possession game, and let me define what I mean. In cover, we've got something called positive possession. Sometimes we call it purposeful possession. So you don't keep the ball for the sake of keeping the ball. You keep it for 2 reasons. One is you use the ball as bait so that you move the opponents. When you move the opponents, it goes back to what I think everything's about. You create space. And you can only do that with short passing, 10-yard passing, to bait them, right? You bait them, there's space, you pass the ball.
The De Zerbi idea at Brighton.
Well, it's a Cruyff idea, which was modified by Pep, and then De Zerbi made a modification. So to all roads, but I'm biased, lead to Cruyff.
Well, yeah, and it's funny actually. In the last podcast we did with Chris Ramsey, after the pod, he has on his iPad 70 and 74 those great Dutch teams, and he's going through that. I mean, the clips of all of that were so apparent. It's interesting to see.
Well, of course, and we had the connection with Cruyff because Will went with Ajax. Cruyff brought him then. Then, I had to come in and sort a problem between Cruyff and Will. This is 40-odd years ago.
Yeah.
So obviously he influenced me. So first of all, it's short passing, 10-meter passing, to actually pull, create the spaces that you need, right?
But you need players that can control the ball and pass the ball to play in that style.
And that's why in the training, the 4-part training, you stick to the core skills.
Yeah.
Receiving the ball, passing the ball, protecting the ball through 1v1, running with the ball,
Yeah.
and shooting.
Yeah.
Because part of positive, purposeful possession, the definition is score goals. That's why shooting and 1v1 creates the opening to score goals. So you stick to your topics, and then comes why explanation of parents, explanation of coaches. So why a possession game? Because it's the only way of playing that can supplement what you're doing on practice day.
Yeah.
Because look, the data's clear. Go into AI and see in the pro game how many times a player would touch the ball in 90 minutes. It's 80, 100. The centre back sometimes much more, but that's certain clubs play with a goalkeeper 50 times. But I put in something really interesting. I never thought AI, and AI has just blown my mind, right? I put in how many times in under 12 football, playing 30 minutes, would a player touch the ball? I never thought he'd give me an answer. Within seconds, 80 to 100 times. Now, is it correct? Of course, it's beyond my expertise, but it seems reasonable anecdotally.
Yeah.
It seems it backs up that you're without the ball most of the game. So the game can't teach you because you're not touching. It can't teach you ball feeling. It can teach you, off the ball and all the things that you do need, but it can't give you that feeling for the ball because you're not touching it enough.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of spending maybe an equal amount of time in each of the core skills? And I'll tell you why. Thinking about a particular player that we have at the under 12 boys level, grassroots level, and he is a very, very strong first touch 1v1 player. But what he can't do is the thing next, which is either pass the ball or shoot the ball. You can give the ball to him in very tight spaces. He'll beat people. He's very comfortable controlling the ball. Amazing first touch, but he doesn't have what to do next. Can you talk about maybe the proportionality or the proportionness of working on the core skills?
So if I can just give us maybe possible solution for this sort of player. So obviously he's maybe one of your best players. It sounds like one of your best players, right? And you've told him 100 times, I guess, right? Or you've told him many times.
No, it's more that he technically finds it difficult to pass or strike the ball.
So he needs to. So your first touch and second touch are linked, right? And the speed of the reaction between the two. Words won't do it. Instruction won't do it. With him, you've either got to say I want you to be a 2-touch or 3-touch player for 15 minutes, not the whole game. Don't that'll just spoil it for him. But a certain period of time, right? Especially 2-touch, a Busquets type of player, a Xavi type of player. You get the ball, you pass the ball. You go into space. Get it, pass it, go into space.
Yeah.
Get it, pass it, go into space. So that's an instruction, condition that you'd ask him. The second time is that. Now, this is maybe more appropriate for at boys and girls at pro clubs. Is you reduce the space so that he or she has no time to think. They will, or their mind automatically, unconsciously makes a decision. But that's the beauty of space and how it's so valuable at the elite level. Is as soon as you start closing, whether it's 3v3, whether it's a passing drill, a passing game, or 7v3, or whatever it is, as soon as you shut the space, you see who thinks the quickest. It actually automatically forces them to think quicker.
Well, no, that's really good advice. And I also think the thing, so he's obviously enjoys that part of receiving the ball, touching the ball, 1v1. And less so, for some reason, there seems to be, he hasn't worked as hard on his passing or his ball striking. So he's reluctant he finds it difficult to pass accurately or to score. I mean, he beats people all the time, but it's that next bit. It seems like his enthusiasm is just focused, or he's been taught just that one thing.
Yeah.
So how about how about in your session planning? How should coaches, grassroots coaches, think about providing equal time in their sessions for each of the core skills?
Well, it's more like going to a drill library and picking a drill DNA that combines first touch, next touch, right? So first touch is always your first touch, the direction and how far it's from your body. Your second touch is either passing, shooting, running with a ball, right? Mm-hmm. Or 1v1. Mm-hmm. So when you go to the Curve library, there's many, many drills that combine first touch, next touch, whether it be passing, whether it be running with the ball, whether it be 1v1, whether it be shooting. And that's the drill you'd pick, that it's not just passing, but it's first touch and passing. It's first touch and 1v1. It's first touch and shooting. So
sure.
They get it into my hand. Wait a second. It's first touch, next touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, so we talked, I think, in depth about sort of construction. Let's move on to the final C of the 3 C's, communication. So the first one's format, and then you've got sort of expert feedback and positivity. Do you want to talk about all those those parts of communication?
So format, what I mean by format is my advice is follow the same format of communication when you step onto the practice field. So the first thing is you don't speak until you're in hear and see distance. Your back is to no one. So I usually hold my hands out and ask everybody to be there, right? So they have to hear and see you, right? The second is you explain what is this going to do for you. I mean, 5 seconds, less dialogue, right? So, for example, this is going to improve your passing. So you're actually saying, I'm going to try to help you with this. Then you do the demonstration. Now, if you're comfortable, because these are technical skills, you can do it yourself. You can pick a player to do it. If it's anything that in the drill that's more than 10 meters, you have to do what you call a mini demonstration, because you can't send somebody 20 yards and start shouting, do this and that. A mini demonstration is where you put all the cones in a little square and they see the logistic of it, right? They do it, you watch, then you give expert feedback. So, and you follow that every single week, these steps. Now, I'm sure there's other ways. I'm not saying I know the only way, but certainly that's the what I would do.
Right.
And I do that every single week.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 C's, and they are. Go ahead.
Well, sorry. So a little word on expert feedback, because it sounds like a really complex thing. So years ago, when Charlie and I were trying to figure out problem solution, so you've got these skills, players were struggling with these skills, how do you help them, right? And then you construct the drill DNA and the game DNA and the session plan, right? So I met, as you know, one of my close friends, Dr. Peter Bain, world-famous neurologist, and have coffee with him just around the corner, actually, as much as I can, once a week or once a month. And Pete started explaining to me how the brain learns skills and how the brain makes decisions. And I said to him, look, you've got the core skills. We've said the 5 core skills, right? It seems to me that when there's a mistake, it always follows the sequence of that skill. For example, when you're receiving the ball, so what's the first thing? So the first thing is look. You look to see where the space is, where your teammates are, and your opponent is. Then you go to space. Then you ask for the ball. And as the ball's coming, you decide where you want to go next, and you position your body. These are 1, 2, 3. If anything goes out of sequence, there's a problem. In 1v1, as soon as you receive the ball, as the ball's coming, you're looking to see where's the goalkeeper, where the players. Again, as it's coming, rather than in most grassroots football, they decide when they get the ball. That's the difference in the pro game, right? The players must do, because of time, space is so restricted, decide as the ball's coming, I'm going to do this. So we've got to try to get our grassroots players to be thinking like that. And so again, with your passing, before you pass, you're looking to see where can you pass. And then what goes wrong is, your timing to the ball, the way you strike it, the accuracy and the speed of you striking it. There's only 2 or 3 things go wrong with each of the core skills. So the expert feedback is me saying, for example, okay, you missed that shot because as you were shooting, you were looking at the ball. Step 2, right? So the first one was fine. The approach, the timing was perfect. Step 3 was okay. He hit the ball accurately. But step 2 was not, because he or she was looking at the ball. The goalkeeper covered it.
Okay. All right. So those are the 3 C's, culminating in communication. So that's basically how grassroots coaches should think about their sessions, their training day, and often
how they do it.
And often they've got 1 hour a week, maybe 2 hours a week, and game day. So that's really, really good stuff. So let's move on to game day. And you've got some tips and I guess a consistency that carries over from how you're thinking about preparing the players and the work that you do in training day.
Yes.
So again, you're looking at the sort of communication and content part of game day. Can you give us some tips around those topics?
Yes, if I can divide it pre-game, during game, post-game, right? So pre-game, again, when I've gone to see Grassroots, my grandsons, the pre-game warm-up should relate to the number of touches they have the ball before they start, right? So, them lining up and occasionally doing something, it isn't, in my opinion, the way to get that number of touches to the maximum. So whatever you do, so take 5 balls, 10 balls if you've got them, do something. Rondos are fantastic. In Curva, we a couple of years ago we made a product which is called Curva Rondos. Some of them are excellent for pre-game.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say just think about that so-called, I hate the word warm-up, but pre-game. What do you do pre-game?
Yeah.
And that should equate to touches, not people waiting around.
Sure. Yeah. And I remember, I don't know if it was you that told me, someone told me about Dennis Bergkamp before his games. He'd count how many touches.
Yes.
He needed to have 1,000 touches on the ball personally before he was warmed up, basically.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you talk about amount of touches, and I think rondos is a great way to do that.
Yes, and because when they start the game well and they become more confident, and but if they're waiting around and they hit the ball once every 4 or 5 times, so I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's not. I don't think. I think it would help to find something pre-game that has a lot of touches.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree, and I think in our experience too, I think, and I'm sure grassroots coaches will agree with me on this, particularly, let's say, under 10 age group, you need 5 minutes also on, I think definitely also, particularly from goal kicks, just where the ball goes, what you're asking the players to do, in terms of team shape. You don't want to bombard them, and that can't be all of what you're doing in your session and in your warm-up pre-game. But I would say you do need 5 minutes, again, particularly on the younger age groups, because they don't know. No. The goalie gets the ball from a goal kick. They don't know kind of what to do, and sometimes they'll just boot it if you don't tell them, no, pass the defender, and the defender's going to try and do this. So yeah, just the sort of tip from my side to grassroots.
Yeah, so I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Playing with the goalkeeper is a different topic, right? It could be one of your sessions. Again, when they're under 10, as soon as they play 7v7 and 9v9, 11, what happens in front of the goalkeeper is diamonds form. At 11v11, it's 3 diamonds. And the width of the diamond, right on the line, right? So that's something that you could work on in one of the sessions, because it's to do with passing, receiving. It's to do with the skill of, because the goalkeeper has to have the same skill, right? Yeah. So you give me the ball, I give it back to you. The goalkeeper goes to the left, he gets it back, goes to the right, but for a purpose. Yes. What you're trying to do is invite the press.
Let's talk quickly about the goalkeeper, and maybe we're jumping back into training here as well.
Yes.
But obviously the goalie doesn't have a lot of time to practice, maybe 1 session a week. Would your advice at the U12 grassroots age group level be to involve the goalkeeper in all core skill stuff that you do, and obviously in the games, put them in goal? Or how should grassroots coaches think about involving their goalie in
training under 12s? I just put them on the field.
Yeah.
Now, if they're serious goalkeepers, some of them have other clubs or schools and they play.
Yeah.
So it's not only the club; they also play for their schools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in your grassroots club training, if it's once a week, I put them on the field.
Okay. That's a good tip. Okay, so that's pre-game. Jumping back into sort of match day. How about during game? What are some good tips for coaches?
Well, the first that I should learn is say nothing. Okay, now, I worked with a fantastic coach, Del Bosque, who was at the Real Madrid Academy. And this is the first I heard. He was really quiet, very, very like Arsene and Gerald Houllier, really sort of, not introverted, but man of few words. When the players got the ball, we're talking about on the sideline, when the coach is on the sideline. When the players got the ball, say nothing, because you're going to confuse him or her. When the ball's dead, you can speak. It goes thrown, okay. And I always thought that was great advice.
Yeah.
And I just want to pass that on. There's no reason, if your player's got the ball, for you to say anything.
Yeah.
In fact, it's confusing.
It does confuse them. You see that. In terms of when you do communicate, maybe at halftime or after the game, this is a well-established sort of approach now about praising effort and hard work over talent. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in that and why you're so positive that that's the right approach?
Yes. So there's a book by Carol Dweck. It's called Positive Mindset. And that's the first. You read that. There's 1,000 times she knows more than me, but everything she says makes sense, right? Also, this whole idea of praising what they've done well. So let's say, for example, you lose 5-0, and they're disappointed, and parents disappointed, etc. But if your conversation is, you did that well, say, the goalkeeper made one good pass, that was a great shot. You helped your teammate.
Yes.
So what you're doing is you're getting away from the result and saying, you did this well, you did this well. I think any sort of criticism, apart from behavior, that's the only, thing, has no teaching benefit. That's why we're teachers, right? And what you're trying to say is, well, look, you did something good. We lost, but you did something good. Because if you destroy, or if you can't improve their confidence or the love of the game, they will leave the game. 12, 13, 14, 15, they will leave because they're not enjoying it.
Yeah.
And this whole idea, I remember when I was a young player, I used to go out, even 14, 15, 16, and say, right, the first 3 passes, I'm going to make like 5-yard passes, and then I'm going to play well. And to have a little sort of goal like that, or I'm going to have 2 shots in the first half. And if I did that,
yeah,
I was successful.
And there's a way for a coach to set individual objectives for players, right? So a mixed ability player under 10, it might be, today try and complete 3 passes.
Exactly, Jim. Exactly.
Or your striker, 5 shots, sketch 5 shots off. Don't care if it hits the corner flags. No problem.
You take 5 shots.
Yeah, and I think players respond, young players, well, everyone, but particularly young players respond to that. And I think they also recognise, well, you're caring about me in this context. It establishes more trust, I think, as well.
Well, also it's real. The only caveat says it's got to be realistic. You can't say like 15 shots in the first half.
Yeah.
But if you downplay it, especially with grassroots players, and they do it, it's all in Carol Dweck's book. She's talking about self-esteem. How when you achieve something, you actually feel that you can achieve more.
Yeah.
Because you've actually done that, whatever that, juggle the ball twice, for example.
Yeah.
And so the coach actually giving it, not every player, but you can mix it up, but giving them sort of, and then at the end, praising them for that.
Yes.
You did it. You did those 2 shots.
Yes. Particularly attitude and effort, right? Particularly when players, maybe more mixed ability or beginner players, are applying themselves, concentrating. That's the bedrock, that's the foundation of improvement.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think we all in Grassroots, you see maybe sometimes more talented players with maybe not the same application, focus or concentration, do well initially, and then perhaps over the arc of the season or over 4 or 5 seasons, they begin to lose the advantage that they have because of their talents being now replaced by kids that are applying themselves over a period of time and improving as a result of that.
Yes, I mean, I'm not one that buys the kids don't try. I think they if they turn up normally, they in various degrees, but they're trying hard. They more or less try hard. The problem, as we've been talking about, is that often they don't have the skill to play in the space they play, so they're not successful, and they don't pay attention to where the spaces are.
Yeah. Okay, so that's during game. The final bit of our 3-part game day tips is post game. What are some of the main sort of tips that I've got here that you said sort of no criticism. We talked about that. We've also talked about identify the individual and team positives. We've talked about that. How about specifics around, particularly the car journey home or, the initial thing that you would say to your son or daughter?
So, yes, this is probably, again, why I think it's so important to get the parents' buy-in, to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, so that you get their buy-in. One of the things, there is a car journey home. My view is just, look, if they bring it up, you can talk about it. If they don't bring it up, just, we're going for pizza or whatever we're going to do. And try to identify the one, if it's a one good thing they did.
Yes.
Forget about the score.
Yes.
And so just that they feel, even if they've lost, they feel some success.
Right. Okay, well, look, that's been a great hour or so for, I think, identifying. Let's review what we did. You identified the 7 most common difficulties in the Grassroots game. We discussed those. Then we talked about training day, how we provide solutions in a way and an approach on improving those 7 common sort of challenges in the Grassroots game and some pro game. And then we talked about game day, how the connection to training day and how you're trying to apply
the extension,
and how you're trying to ensure that that's a positive part of their development. Final question for you, and I know you're an avid reader, particularly with the sort of self-help books. You mentioned Carol Dweck's book Mindset. Are there a couple of other books that you recommend for Grassroots coaches to read?
Well, one person who's been hugely influential on my career is a guy called Anders Ericsson. He's passed now. But Anders Ericsson is the father of the 10,000 hours theory. And there's a book called Peak. It's a little bit heavy for me, but of course don't judge readers by me. But Matthew Syed has written a really good book. And Matthew, I worked with Matthew in the Premier League. He's a journalist, but he wrote a book called Bounce, and Bounce gives to the layman an explanation of how to improve. Of course, to achieve excellence, but the road to excellence.
Sure.
And that absolutely influenced me in understanding that a teacher, well, that's what we are, coaches, once they identify why they do something, and then what they do, and then how they do it, and learn about those 3 things, they've got a chance of affecting the progress of that player. Because after all, that's why we're here, right? We want to improve that player. And in Grassroots, you've got that added improve. You want them to love the game.
Sure.
And so much of the love of the game, in my view, if I had to pick one thing for a young player between 6 and 14 years old, it's loving the game. And we coaches can help them love the game.
Yeah, forever. I mean, look, with all due respect, look, at the time of your life, you still love the game as passionate as ever.
Yes.
I'm middle-aged, also the same. And watching your kids or the kids that you coach is the best, and it's still inspiring. And I think also, just if we could do a quick aside, watching good teams sort of do well as well, thinking about PSG obviously winning the Champions League in the way that they did it is also fuel for the love of the game, isn't it? I mean, can you talk a little bit about PSG's performance and what you thought grassroots coaches can take from that?
Yes. So I think PSG, I'll pick just that one game against Milan, they were so aggressive, vis-a-vis so direct. So what's one of the things in Curva, one of the new projects, as you know, is we've got a project called the Winning Zone. It's actually developing or teaching players how to create and score more goals in the last 35 meters, because most goals are scored in that area. And the PSG game remind me of the directness of wide players, the right-footed player playing on the left and the left-footed playing on the right, using a curve move to cut in to shoot. You had Lamal and the Georgian player and
no, Yamal, Barca. You mean Dembele and
I'm sorry,
Doué.
I mean Dembele and exactly Dembele and I can never pronounce his name.
The number 7 for PSG.
The number 7. So he's a right-footed player, plays on the left, cuts in, shoots.
Yeah.
Dembele, the opposite.
Yeah.
And this directness was very difficult for Milan to come, because once you've got the space on the sides, once you cut in, then where does the goalkeeper go? How do you block that shot, right? And so the first thing was the use of the wide players and getting back to the value of wide players, creating goal chances, not crosses. So in my day, the wide player was really responsible for the crosses, and there was more heading goals and more sort of the bet, if you like. The cross comes over, who's going to win it, you know.
Yeah.
But this is very precise.
Yeah.
You know, you're cutting in, your opposite foot, it takes a shot.
Yeah, it's a great...
I think that's I thought, and good for the coach, because that coach is another child of Cruyff.
Yeah. Yeah, Luis Enrique, and obviously with his backstory, unfortunately, tragically losing his daughter, it was a wonderful human story as well to see.
He's top man, and I think all these maybe another podcast, the history of the development, evolution of how the game is played, and you know, many roads going back to Johan Cruyff and Will Curver, and how. The modern game has been influenced, and then what me and Charlie may have done, how it's actually changed how the game's taught.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to also acknowledge it's not the only way to play, right? It's a belief of you could go the Forest route and you know, not retain possession of the ball as much and still be successful. But I think you've always said, coach what you believe as well, coach the way you want to approach and what kind of interests you in the game. And I think that's probably also a good tip for coaches starting out. Try and think about how you want your team to play, and then you know, construct and make your approach accordingly.
Yes. I honestly, I think it's wrong to say that style is wrong. I think you can say I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know. But that's different from saying it's wrong.
Yeah.
So I would never, you know, some of these coaches like Mourinho, etc., I respect incredibly well. Fantastic careers, fantastic results. Would I want my team to play like that? But that's then an emotional reaction from me.
Yeah.
It's not my professional reaction is if he wins games. Because that's what we know. We know football is competitive and the object is to win.
Yeah.
Now, as long as you win fairly, who am I to say that's the wrong way?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for the podcast.